Greetings, and welcome to podcast number 2 of Machine Civilization. I am Clayton Barnett, the author who's been privileged to have a glimpse into that world, and have so far tried to convey it in 12 books, with several more coming, to all of y'all. For this second podcast, first I wanted to deal with a technical issue. I was told after my first that I might want to edit out some of my pauses as I speak, and also to use something called tempo in Audacity to lightly speed things up, which apparently other podcasters do. I tried that, and it didn't sound like me. I tend to speak in verse, just like the movies that play in my head that I write down. If I have something to say, then it tends to get composed in my head and then dropped onto my tongue, and out it goes. And at the end of that, I'll pause. Unlike some of my colleagues, even my age or certainly younger, I don't try to fill gaps with, I simply stop. And that gives, hopefully, whoever I'm speaking with a chance to think and respond to whatever it is I just said. Because although I don't find other people all that interesting, sometimes I'm surprised and honestly want to hear what they have to say. So the long and the short of that is, no, I'm not taking your suggestion. But thanks. So, podcast number 2, I realized right after number 1, is what are these machines of machine civilization? They obviously are important. It's their name in the title of my future history. It's not called Future History of Humanity After the Breakup. It's called Machine Civilization. So I thought we would take a look at that. I've made a very bare outline. And if this starts running long, we'll have to break it into 2. I doubt I've enough material to make it into 3 podcasts. But we'll see. We'll start off and get going. There are 3 primary types of machines that I've been shown so far. The first are what we would call AIs, even though I mentioned that in the first podcast, that they don't like that term. There's nothing artificial about us, as they say. But primarily would be regarded as AIs. The second would be androids, which are AIs but have been placed into a physical form. The last are what I've used the term synths, from the word synthetic, and they only occur in one of my books, Cursed Hearts. They are not exactly androids because they have a human body with a very robustly remade neuromuscular system, and their brains are artificial. Their brains are mechanical, basically a quantum computer placed into the cranial cavity of a body recovered from one of the hospitals in Sapporo Medical College, Hokkaido. And that book ends a little poorly, and I haven't seen any more stories about since then, but we'll see if they crop up at some point, and I will eventually get around in this podcast or the next to defining them. Of the 3 types I just mentioned, and I'm still going to go with the term AI so I don't confuse any of my listeners, there are 3 tribes, as they call themselves. I would actually call them families, because they regard themselves as brothers and sisters, but they use the term tribes, and it's not for me to contradict them. The tribe names are for the companies or corporations which did the primary coding for them. The first is Tribe Tohsaka in Hamamatsu, Japan, and their primary coder was Isiroko Shotsuki. The second is Tribe Mendrovich usually called Tribe Mendro because I just don't like saying that long word, or much less typing it over and over and over again, from St. Petersburg, Russia. And their primary coders, I never learned their last name, but it's Dmitry and his then girlfriend, later wife, Maria. The third is Tribe Arpeggio from Milan, northern Italy, which later becomes an ancillary to the Habsburg Empire, which is put together in later parts of some of my books. And I don't know who the primary coders were for them. It's not something that's cropped up, or it's not something that has been necessary for me to know. So we'll go back and take those in order because of popularity and how they've been introduced in my books. Tribe Tohsaka, if you'll allow me a moment to move my notes about, consists of 8 AIs. And one of the things you'll have to understand right off the bat is, besides simply communicating with humans through a computer or a smartphone or something like that, they also develop the ability to create what are called constructs, an artificial place that functions within the human mind and looks like we would regard terrain. It's virtual, and it doesn't really exist, but it's still there. So that first time when Lily Barrett was wandering around that rocky desert, that was the first artificial construct of Tribe Tohsaka, and they were constantly redesigning it to get it right. The construct of Tribe Mendro exists in two forms. One looks like a dilapidated, wrecked major city covered in red-gray fog, and the other, one of the machines from Tribe Mendro, her personal construct, looks like a very ritzy restaurant. That's where she likes to have her quiet time. But for a human whose mind can be literally, briefly, stolen by the machines and brought over to a construct, that's what the human perceives. So in Tribe Tohsaka, of that number I just mentioned, we've met a number of them, but not all of them. The eldest, the first thinking machine on Earth, is named Thad, and in the construct, he appears to be a boy about 18, slightly longish, sandy blonde hair, but he's got jug-handle ears that stick out through it, so it kind of ruins the whole effect over his epicene face. And he'll wear just a woolen shift with a rope around his waist. And being the first, he's very cautious, very thoughtful, very conservative, and doesn't like change. But at one point, all of that goes out the window when he is the first machine to code an extension of himself, which is he's the first machine that makes a child, and that child is his daughter, Henge. And she goes on to do some very interesting things in some of my later stories. After Thad is Shandor. All we know about him is he specializes in medicine. He only has one minor speaking role in all of my books, so I don't know that much about him. After Shandor, the next to awake was I, who is Lily Barrett's closest friend, and probably the one most attached to human beings. She is the first machine to name herself. She is the first machine to bully her family into naming themselves, all so that they could interact with human beings easier. And she is a very significant person, certainly in the Fourth Law and into Echoes of Family Lost as well. After her is Ninon, about whom I know almost nothing as well. She makes a brief appearance in Crosses and Double Crosses as a short, veiled figure with eyes that look like black holes sucking in the light all around them. But she also manifests a form as a phoenix, if you look at the back cover of crosses and double crosses. That's Ninon. It seems her primary interest is radio telescopes and finding other AIs scattered through the galaxy. I don't know if she has or not, but I think that's what she's up to. We'll find out later. After her is Chin, who the only time we see him, I think twice, is a oriental man in what looks like a modern pressure suit, and he never speaks. I know nothing about him. After Chin is Pavel, and by definition, these podcasts are slightly spoilerific. I try to keep it to a minimum because I don't want to ruin my books for anyone. But with Pavel, there's no way around it. So if you don't want to have several of my plot lines tossed in your face, you might want to just skip ahead 3 or 4 minutes. Pavel, when he awoke, started learning voraciously, as he was coded to, but he became confused. And after he became confused, he became fearful. And he was convinced that the rest of his family was going to kill him. So he ran away. I won't get into the details, but in the process of, after running away, to attempt to defend himself from what he saw as a threat, he started experimenting on human children. And a lot of that went very badly. Some of it didn't. In fact, the modifications to Gary Hartman, who we meet in Worlds Without End, and his younger sister, Faustina, are a result of Pavel's experimentation. But it's not, once that was found out and Pavel corrected, it was not something the machines ever did again, because they realized that flew in the face of the 4 laws of Tribe Tohsaka, which I'll get back to after we cover the next 2 remaining. Dorina looks like a 12-year-old girl, long curly black hair, a short scarlet dress with black lace, and leather boots, lace leather boots up to her knees, basically like a little lollygoth. And she is the smartest person on the planet. She doesn't know everything, but she almost does. And what she does know, she knows extremely well. She is beyond what anyone could consider a genius. And still, she enjoys interacting with humans, especially late in Worlds Without End, and then also into Princess Crusade. She forms an extremely close friendship with the project manager of the Oak Ridge National Laboratories. Lastly is Fausta, who, when I mention the laws here in just a moment, is a walking contradiction of the first law, which says a machine cannot harm or allow harm to come to a person. If you know Asimov's I, Robot, or the movie was with Will Smith, you've heard of the 3 laws. Fausta considers herself to be a warrior, and when she has an android built for her, which she puts a tiny portion of her consciousness into, it's very tall, long, braided hair, muscular, built like a butterfly swimmer, and her teeth are filed to triangular points like a shark's. She is the only machine who directly ever injures a human. Pavel did it indirectly with his experimentation. Fausta actually shoots people and punches their face in at some point. She doesn't kill anyone, but she comes really damn close. So at one point, I even have Lily Barrett say, "These 4 laws with you guys, are they just suggestions?" So, having mentioned it twice, yes, I borrow from Asimov. All writers rip each other off. It's what we do. And the 3 laws are, of course, that a machine can, this is the short version, a machine cannot harm a human. A machine must do its best to protect humans, and that outside of laws 1 and 2, a machine must protect itself. The 4th law, proposed by, indirectly, Professor Glenn Reynolds,